Zat Hashem, today in Masechet Shabbat, we're going to learn Zayin Amud Aleph 7a. We're starting the bottom of Vav Amud Bet at Rav Ashi. And let's just remember exactly where we're holding before we go ahead. We left off last week at the bottom of Vav Amud Bet with a stira. We had a contradiction. Because on one hand, in our Mishnah, when we were talking about the Arba Reshuyot, the 4 domains for Shabbat, we listed Bik'ah, which is an open flat area, like a grassy flat area. It was listed under the karmilit, the reshut called karmilit. On the other hand, we had a Mishnah in Taharot. That was in the Braita. The Mishnah in Taharot seems to say, for Ilchot Shabbat, a Bik'ah is considered a reshut hayachid. So it's a stira. Is it considered karmilit or is it reshut hayachid? So Ula told us last week, which was one answer, that really it's a karmilit. It's not considered a reshut hayachid. So why does the Mishnah call it reshut hayachid? So as to say it's not reshut harabim. It really just means to say what it's not. It's not reshut harabim like it might be for tum'ah, whatever it is, but it's not reshut hayachid either. Really, it's a karmilit. That was Ula's answer. A little bit of a difficult answer, because if you want to say it's karmilit, say it's karmilit. So we'll get to that in a minute. We'll see. But Rav Ashi gives a second answer. Rav Ashi is the bottom of Vav Amud Bet. And we're going to really have 2 sections today. We'll go through this answer, and the second section we'll get into is the definition of karmilit and examples also, which really, there's a lot of different details in halachot that we'll come to today, God willing. So let's see. Rav Ashi says the second answer. Let me just speak it out and then we'll see it inside. Rav Ashi is the second answer. Rav Ashi answers, Rav Ashi answers that the case over here is, it's a open area, but it has walls, okay? It has mechitzot. Now this is a specific ukimta, we're gonna say like this. Generally, if you have a fenced-in area, it's used for living, for diurin, we're gonna call it, regular living use, that's reshut hayachid, no question. You have walls 10 tfachim tall, it's an area that's at least 4 by 4 tfachim, it's reshut hayachid, okay. But, what if you have an area that's a big field, and it's not used for diurim? Means it wasn't fenced in for residential use, it's called. So there's no house next to it. So it's not exactly like a backyard. Backyard is residential use. So it's like this. If it's small enough and it's fenced in, that's reshut hayachid, no problem. The problem is if it's too big. So the Chachamim came along and said, even though mideoraita, it's considered a reshut hayachid, Zayin Amud Aleph. It's considered a reshut hayachid mideoraita because tachlis, it's a fenced area, it's closed in, and it's a private property. But it's given the chomer, the chumrah of a karmilit as well, and therefore you can't carry 4 amot in that area. That's the halacha. If it's too big, because it looks already like a public area, it doesn't look as much like a private area. However, now it has the chomer of reshut hayachid and it has the chomer of karmilit. So if somebody would throw something from reshut harabim into that area, you'll be chayav because it's like hotza'ah from reshut harabim to reshut hayachid. But in addition, you're not allowed to carry 4 amot in there like a karmilit. So midoraita, it's considered reshut hayachid, and this is how Rav Ashi is going to explain the Mishnah. Where it's fenced in this large area, it's considered midoraita reshut hayachid, and that's what the Mishnah meant when it said it's reshut hayachid. That's what it means. So let's see that inside. Rav Ashi says like this, Zayin Amud Aleph. Kegon de itla mechitzot. We're talking about this large fenced-in area with walls. There's walls. V'chihad amar Ula, like the case of Ula. Amar Rav Yochanan. Ula Rav Yochanan says like this, karpaf. I don't know if that's modern Hebrew also, karpaf. Karpaf is imagine a large field, yoter mi beit sa'atayim, but it is larger than an area of 2 sa'ah. Now, that is 50 by 50 amot, which is 5,000. It is 5,000 square amot. So roughly 10,000 square feet, roughly. So it's not a tremendous area. It's probably like the size of some lots of homes in Miami Beach. You could imagine. It's probably roughly what it's like. So 10,000 square feet, 5,000 square amot, karpaf, yoter mi beit sa'atayim, larger than the beit sa'atayim, shelo kaf ledira. Now it was not enclosed, and the walls were not put up ledira. Meaning when they were put up, it wasn't put there for living. It was for some other purpose, not for people to live, not for residential use. That's what it wasn't. Va'afilu kur. Now even if it's larger than that, kur. Kur is 30 sa'ah, or just the numbers are 75,000 square amot, or if you could imagine, 150,000 square amot. Now that's a feet. It's a large area already. Va'afilu kurayim, or even double that, which would be 150,000 square amot. Hazorek letocho chayav. So what did you do? You had this very large area. You fenced it in. It was very large. A large area. You fenced it in. But it wasn't fenced in originally for dira, for residential use. So now, like this. Market. Well, maybe. But I don't know. That probably would be shutei yachid anyways. But the point is, since it wasn't fenced in for residential use, so now what's going to happen is, it has the status of Reshut Yachid Midoraita because it's fenced in, it has all of the requirements, but the Chachamim say you can't carry 4 amot in that area, like a karmilit. That's the reality. So what happens is, Azorek letocho chayav. Since Midoraita it's Reshut Yachid, if somebody would throw something from the Reshut Rabim into it, you're chayav for hotza'ah from Reshut to Reshut. Says Rav Ashi, that's the case of the Mishnah, that it's a bik'ah, but it's a bik'ah that's fenced in, not for residential use, and it's a very large area. If it was smaller than this, there's no chumrah like this. We say it's Reshut HaYachid. But since it's such a large area, it's dealt with as midoraita, Reshut HaYachid, which is why the Mishnah calls it Reshut HaYachid. But you have a chumrah, you can't carry there like a karmilit as well. So that's why it's called Reshut HaYachid. My time, what's the reason? Because mechitzahi, really it has walls. It's just lacking the residential aspect of it, so it has that chumrah. So the Gemara says beautiful. So you have 2 answers of this Mishnah. We have Ula who says that when it says Reshut HaYachid, it really means karmilit. It just says Reshut HaYachid, not that it's a Reshut HaRabim. And we have Rav Ashi who says, no, it is Reshut HaYachid midoraita. It's a large fenced-in area, not for residential use. So the Gemara is Bishlam Rav Ashi lo amar Ula. I understand why Rav Ashi doesn't want to answer like Ula, because Rav Ashi is saying the Mishnah says Reshut HaYachid. How could you tell me it holds it's a it's a karmilit if it calls that area bik'ah Reshut HaYachid? It doesn't make sense. Ela Ula my time lo amar kishmate. But Ula, why doesn't he follow his own shita? See, that shita about karpaf that we just quoted above, it actually is Ula himself. So why wouldn't Ula himself answer that the Mishnah and Ta'arot, when it calls this area Reshut HaYachid, it's talking about this scenario, a large fenced-in area. Why would he say a different answer?
Fenced in with ceiling or no ceiling?
Not necessarily, no ceiling. Yeah, just need walls. So Amar Lecha, so Ula answers, because if it had walls, like Rav Ashi is saying, Bik'ah Karila, that's not called Bik'ah anymore. Karpafi, that's Karpaf. Karpaf means a fenced-in open area. So why would the Mishnah and Tarot call it Bik'ah if it really is a Karpaf? That must be, it's not talking about a Karpaf, it's talking about an open area without walls, and therefore I don't want to answer like that. Rav Ashi, Reshut HaYachid Katani, but Rav Ashi says, look, the Mishnah and Tarot says Reshut HaYachid. So you can't tell me that the Mishnah holds that it's a karmilit if it calls it a Reshut HaYachid, and therefore he has to come up with this other answer. Let's move on now. Now we're going to have a sugya, really for the rest of the day, discussing what exactly is a karmilit, the primary example, and then we'll talk about different examples that tie into it, that we talk about the streets, etc. So if we look back at the Braita told us that there's these different areas that are considered karmilit. So it said like this: Aval Yam, Bika, the sea, this open fields, Istevanit, which is the bench area, Veha Karmelit, and the Karmelit. Those are all Karmelit. So the Gemara says the obvious issue is, you're listing areas that are Karmelit. Why are you saying and the Karmelit? Those are all examples of karmilit. So why are you listing it? Why are you listing it as a separate category? That's not a way to make a list. So what the Gemara is going to answer is, that karmilit is really emphasizing the primary example. It's like the av of karmilit. That's what we're talking about here. And from this, we paskin all those other cases are like that. Mm-hmm. So what's the primary example of karmilit? So Matan just pointed out, it's something that really should be part of Reshut HaRabim, but since it's not convenient to travel in that area, as we'll see in a minute, therefore it can't be like Reshut HaRabim actually, so it's given status of karmilit, which is in between. So let's see that. So says the Gemara, karmilit, etu kakul hunami lav karmilit ninu, with the rest of the things in the list not considered karmilit, so why are you listing it as a separate category? So no, the example here of karmilit is the primary example. This is a corner or a nook of the public that's near the Reshut Harabim, but it can't be looked at as Reshut Harabim because it's not in the flow of traffic. The afal gav de zimnin, and I'll explain the example in a minute. The afal gav de zimnin de dachaki be rabim ba'ile legava. Even though there are times when there's a lot of people in the street that the rabbim will push into that area, but kivan de lo nichad tashmishdei, since it's not convenient to utilize that area, ki karmilit dami, it's therefore considered a karmilit. Now, if you have the art scroll, Baruch Hashem, they do for us a big chesed, and they made pictures for us. They probably have it there too. Kedai to look at these pictures, because it makes it a lot easier to understand. You see, there's two pictures. You should have two pictures there. So the first one, if you look, you see it says house, 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 house. You see that?
Okay. Yes.
So Rashi gives two pshatim. What is this example of karmilit? The ideal example or the original example. So the first example Rashi explains is where you have a row of homes and then you have the Reshut Harabim next to it. The homes are in gray and the public domain is next to it. Nook is a small area. So look at this. One of the homes, as you see in the middle there,
smaller.
The property line is pulled back. It's pulled a little bit back earlier or closer in from the other homes. And then what you're left with is a small area between that home and the Reshut Harabim. Now usually when people would walk, they wouldn't walk in that area because it's inconvenient. It means you have to go out of the street and back into the street. It's like driving on the shoulder.
We spoke about it.
That's what it's like. It's like driving on the shoulder. So it's like driving on the shoulder, which means that it's not tachlis considered the normal hilucho, the normal travel of the Reshut Harabim. So it's not easy to walk there necessarily. It's not convenient. So what the Chachamim said is, this can't be looked at as Reshut Harabim mamash. So what are we going to say? That's considered the optimal example, the primary example of karmilit. Now Rashi gives another example. If you look at the next picture, you see how you have those same row of homes, but one of the homes is a triangle shape. Do you see that? Mm-hmm. Everybody see that? Do you have that there? I don't know if you have it there. Yeah, no, you do. On that. Yeah, exactly.
This is the first example, no?
That was the second example. Oh, that was the first example. No, the first one was... Oh, you don't have the first example? That's so strange.
Oh, Yochai.
Look,
That's
you see? 1, 2, and then this is the first example of Rashi. The first one is the home is recessed, okay?
No,
the second example Rashi brings is the one you have there, which is you have the same...
Similar.
So I'll explain a chiluk in a minute, but look at the second example. Row of homes, one of them comes out at a triangular point. You see how the one in the middle... Now in this example, you see clearly it's even more, like you just said, less convenient to travel in that little area. So the Sei Chazal, that's not Reshut Harabim, even though it's attached, it's still considered karmilit.
So where the karmilit is end?
Well, by the house.
By the line?
By the line, let's say.
The line of the houses.
Houses, yeah. So now look, what's
I
the
have to measure the
nafkamina?
airspace?
Oh, what's the nafkamina? One second. What's the nafkamina between these two pshatim in Rashi? Rashi quotes two pshatim. So the Rishonim explain like this. Remember I mentioned the other day, how do we define a Reshut HaYachid? So there's a machloket in the Rishonim. 4 walls or 3 walls?
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
Remember I said this? So like this would be the nafkamina. If you go with the first pshat in Rashi, how many walls do you have there? No. The first pshat, 3. Now if you hold that Reshut HaYachid is 3 walls, that area shouldn't be karmilit. That area should be Reshut HaYachid. So the first pshat in Rashi follows the shito to say Reshut HaYachid needs 4 walls. So this can't be called Reshut HaYachid, ela rather it's karmilit. Fine. The second pshat in Rashi, how many walls? You only have 2 walls, because each of the triangular corners is a separate area. So that could go with the shito to hold that Reshut HaYachid is 3 walls. This is not Reshut HaYachid. This is considered a karmilit.
But it is easier to define.
I hear that. But this is the nikuda which we have to remember. We're saying, what is karmilit? It's an area that is essentially attached to Reshut Harabim, but it's not a convenient travel. So therefore, it's not Reshut Harabim. Rather, it is considered... it's considered karmilit. Now, it is important, what Matan pointed out, there do have to be certain numbers that are met too. which is it has to be an area that's between 3 and 10 tefachim tall and 4 by 4 tefachim. Otherwise, if it's smaller than that, let's say it's 3 by 3 tefachim, it's considered makom petur. Right? That is true. We'll get to that in a minute. But if you have those numbers, it's
so the walls are basically like we said, right? Good achit.
That's a different story. That's
No?
good. That's something
There
else.
is
walls
there is a walls here.
Yeah, yeah.
There is a
The
real
walls of
walls.
the house.
So the
right?
walls are between 3 and 10 tefachim. Let's just say like that. Let's just assume. Yeah. Because that's what we're going to get into now in terms of karmilit. It has to be 4 by 4 tefachim with walls that are between 3 and 10 tefachim tall. So let's see that inside. That's actually what we're going to get into now. But that's the idea. So what's the Gemara saying? That the Braita writes, V'ha karmilit, to emphasize, this was the primary example that Chazal, because they saw that it's close to the Reshut Harabim, but it's not used as much by the Reshut Harabim, this is karmilit in halacha. The other examples of Yam, Bika, all of those other examples are derivatives. They're learnt from this example. This is like the source of all those other examples.
This is the source of all the
other examples of karmilit.
This
Exactly.
is the best
Primary example
of karmilit.
Ken, exactly. Like the ultimate picture of karmilit. Exactly. Okay, let's go weiter. Let's continue on over here.
So from here you can learn about
But how
Yes.
you can define 10 tefachim when a house is at least 100 tefachim?
Doesn't have to be 100 tefachim. Oh, I hear what you're saying.
The height.
I hear what you're saying.
If it's up to 10 tefachim, from 3 to 10, which is up to the height of the table, right?
Right.
Who can live in a 10 tefachim?
Oh, I hear what you're asking. I hear that kasha. It's a good question.
Because if it's too low, how it's karmilit? It's not become makom patur? No, makom patur because it's less than 4 by 4.
You're asking a good question, Matan. I hear
Less
you.
than 4 by 4, but it's have to be. So it's either Reshut HaYachid, no?
You're asking a good question. You're
But Reshut
saying...
HaYachid it cannot be because it's actually have to be 4.
No,
four
exactly. That's the problem. It can't be Reshut HaYachid.
So
Exactly.
because
That's
the wall
answer.
denied basically.
Exactly. That's what you have to say.
But
It
the height
loses-
is confusing
so
me.
Matan's saying good. It has to be that even though it's 10 tvachim tall, but the problem is you don't have 4 walls or 3 walls, depending on the shita, so it's not Reshut HaYachid. But it can't be Reshut HaRabim Mamash because it's not in the flow.
Convenient.
So it has to be, this is karmilit. Very interesting. That's all these little details come together in that picture. Beautiful. Let's continue on, Chevra. We have a lot to cover today. Zat Hashem, we're just getting started. Now the Gemara tells us like this. Let me just paint a picture for you because the art school doesn't have a picture of this. You know the shuk in Eretz Yisrael? You know the shuk? So you have a large area in the center, which was the marketplace. Plaza, we could call it. Large area. That's Reshut HaRabim. Okay, busy, that's where everybody is going, traveling, walking, busy, fine. Next to it, you have what's called Amudin. You have pillars. Okay, pillars. Now, these pillars are the height and width to be considered karmilit, which means they're between 3 and 10 tefachim tall, between that, and they're 4 by 4 tefachim width and length. Okay, that's pillars. What were those used for? The socharim, the merchants, used to hang their merchandise on these pillars. Okay, they used to hang their merchandise on these pillars.
Okay.
Behind the pillars, which means farther away from the plaza, farther away from the market, there were these stone blocks, or steps, benches you could call it, that the merchants would sit on. So just get that picture in your head for a second. You have plaza, market, all the people are walking through here, that's Reshut HaRabim. Next to it, you have pillars, which are the size and width of karmilit.
ממילא in ירושלים.
Amida, yeah.
העמודים, יש את זה הולך במרכז במילא, ויש את העמודים הרציניים האלה באמצע.
And then next to it, farther from the public area, are these little benches that the socharim used to sit on. We're going to have a machloket like this. Both where the amudin are and the pillars can't be Reshut HaYachid. It's not the sufficient amount for Reshut HaYachid. The question is, are these areas of the amudin and these little steps next to it where they would sit part of Reshut HaRabim, or is that like karmilit?
karmilit.
Now,
Karmilit.
now tell me why it should be
You
karmilit.
can't go straight to
Beautiful,
the-
like we just
yeah.
discussed, exactly.
For majority of
The
people.
major important idea here to be karmilit is that it's not convenient. It's not in the derech hilucho of the Reshut HaRabim.
You're never
Beautiful.
gonna see
A
a
person
person
can
walk
walk
like
there,
that.
not many people.
You never see a person walk like that.
Excellent. So what we're going to say is like this. Everybody agrees the steps where they would sit is karmilit, because that's already so far out and inconvenient, that's not Reshut Harabim. There will be a machloket though, the place of the Amudin, which is closer to Reshut Harabim, if that's considered Reshut Harabim, or is that also like karmilit? That's a machloket. Pillars.
In Hebrew,
Amudin. Pillars, it's in.
Okay, never mind.
Yeah, let's see. Let's see it inside. Ki atar Rav Dimi amar Rabbi Yochanan. So the first shita is Rav Dimi quoted Rabbi Yochanan. He said like this: Bein amudin nidon ke karmilit. Between the pillars is also like karmilit. My time, what's the reason? Afal gav de darsi barabim. Even though people do walk through there, kivan de lo mistagilu behedya. Since it's not a direct way to walk, it's inconvenient. You have pillars scattered throughout, so you have to go around and weave. It's not convenient. So therefore, ke karmilit damya, that area is also like a karmilit. Amar Rabbi Zera, Amar Rabbi Yehuda. Amar Rabbi Yehuda argues, it's tiva shelifnei amudin. He says like this: the stone steps or benches behind the pillars, nidonin ke karmilit. That is like a karmilit. But as we'll see, the amudin is not necessarily. Let's see. So the Gemara explains like this: Leman da amar bein amudim. According to the first shita, Rabbi Yochanan, between the pillars is like a karmilit. So kol sheken it's tiva. Certainly, the it's tiva would be considered not Reshut Harabim. The stone steps would be considered also like a karmilit. But Lamanda Amar it's diva. According to the second shita, that the stone steps are considered karmilit. It's divahu de lo necha tashmishtei. That's farther from the public area. It's less convenient to use those for the public. That would be considered karmilit. Avol bein amudim de necha tashmishtei. But between these pillars, which is easier for the public to access, so lo, that would not be considered karmilit. That would be considered Reshut Harabim. Lishna Charina, there's another language for the second shita. It's a similar idea. Between the pillars that people would sometimes go, that's considered Reshut Harabim. So this is another yesod, the same idea really as before, which is, it has to be to some degree, it is functional within normal public walking. If not, it already goes into the category perhaps of karmilit, as we're saying now.
But it's very important to know how you place the Amud in the post.
Correct. If it was, you're right. If it was in like an even strip and people could walk through there evenly, logically that would be
just one line and people go from here.
Exactly, that would be logically Reshut Harabim. So if you look in the picture, actually Artsville has a little bit of a picture. They're scattered. There's these like scattered little poles. You can't walk through there comfortably. You're not driving your car through there. So therefore, that would not necessarily be considered Reshut Harabim. It might be karmilit. Exactly. Let's continue. Now, a new rule, Chavra. We're going to have a new rule now. We've learned until now that if something is within 10 tvachim of the ground in Reshut Harabim, within 10 tvachim of the ground, what is the halacha? Within 10 tvachim of the ground, it's like on the ground. Okay, but listen to this, the chiluk we're about to say. If there is something on the ground that's standing there, but it has its own independent use or function. It has its own use, or it has some independent chashivut from the Reshut Harabim. And I'll give you an example in a minute. Then, if somebody would pick something up in Reshut Harabim and put it on that, it would not be considered carrying 4 amot in Reshut Harabim. That would possibly be considered either Mekom Petur or karmilit, because it's looked at as a separate entity from the Reshut Harabim. Now let me explain. The case we're going to discuss here is where you have a brick. Leveina is a brick. And the brick, as the picture shows us very nicely, is 3 by 3 tvachim. This is how Rashi learns. In the width and length, but in the height, it depends. Different bricks had different height. So let me just explain outside and then we'll see it inside. If it's 3 by 3 tvachim in width and length, so that's not considered a karmilit because it has to be 4 by 4. Actually, it would be considered Mekom Petur. Beautiful. Now, we're going to see this brick is considered as having a separate use. Why? Because if people are walking by and this brick is tall enough, they're not going to step on it. They'll go around it. So that shows us already, according to some shitot, as we'll see, that this is considered a separate entity, a separate existence, and it's not like putting something in Reshut Harabim. So now listen to the two examples. One example is he picks up something sticky. The example Rashi says is like a date or some mud, something like that. He picks it up and he throws it. Now listen to the two psakim. If it lands on the face of the brick, look in the picture, you could see it. The front of the brick, the front.
Which page is it?
782, if you want to look at that. If it lands on the face of the front of the brick, so like this, as Rashi learns is, if it's on the face of the brick, now we're going to say is, it's true, this brick on top of it might have a separate function, but on the face, that's considered batel to the Reshut HaRabim. Because it's in the airspace of the Reshut HaRabim, and as the Riva, Tosafot adds, since it sees the ground, that sticky thing is stuck to the front of the brick, and it sees the ground, that's like you threw it on the ground itself, and you'll be chayav for akira and hanacha in Reshut HaRabim. However, if he picks something up and throws it and it lands on top of the brick, as I said, since people avoid that brick in public, it's considered a separate function. Since it's a separate function, it's not like he did it at Hanacha and Reshut HaRabim, and you're not going to be chayav. Exactly. Let's see that inside now. It's going to be depends where it falls. Exactly. Exactly. That's the
nobody passed on this thing. You see, the people never work on the stone.
That's the yesod. Exactly. Let's read it inside. Let's see the machloket now. Let's see. Amar Rabba Bar Shila, Amar Rav Chisda. Leveina zekufa b'Reshut HaRabim. So you have this brick standing in Reshut HaRabim. Za'ak v'tach b'fanea. Again, if someone picked something up, let's say he picked up some cement, and it's stuck to the front of the brick, the face of the brick, chayav. That's considered as if it landed in Reshut HaRabim. The way the Riva and Tosafot explains is because since it sees the ground, you can't say that's an independent Reshut, and therefore it's like it did Anachan Reshut HaRabim. Al gaba patur. However, if it lands on the top of the brick, that's considered a separate domain, a mekom patur, if it's 3x3 tfachim, and therefore, 3x3 in width and length, and therefore it will be patur because he did not do hanacha in Reshut HaRabim. Abaye ve'Ravad Amri Tavai, but Abaye and Rava both explained a very important point. Vehu shegavoa shlosha. This would only be true if it's 3 tfachim tall. Remember, we didn't say how tall the bricks are. If it's 3 tfachim tall. Now, why are Abaye and Rava saying this? Because the lo darsi batla rabim. Because if you have a brick that's 3 tfachim tall, people will not step on it. When you're walking, there's always something in the street. You don't mind stepping on it if it's very small, and then you continue walking. But say Abaye and Rava, if it's 3 tfachim tall, a brick, you're not going to step on it, you go around it. That gives it independent chashivut as mekom petur.
Exactly, when we go to the kotel, it is steps on the, say, sometimes it's pumping like that.
Exactly.
And you walk on it.
Exactly, that's exactly the svara.
Exactly. Nobody work on
That's exactly the svara. Exactly.
You remember we go to the kotel?
So therefore it's considered a separate reshut. Therefore it's mekom petur. Exactly. That's a different story. Batzad. Aval, but continue Abaye and Rava, it's like this. Hizmi vehigi, if you're talking about a thorn bush, hizmi vehigi is a thorn bush. Like a little plant with thorns.
Okay.
Sharp. Nobody wants to step on that. So says Abaye and Rava, logically then, even if it's less than 3 tfachim, if you throw on that, you're also patur. Why? Because since nobody's stepping on that, they don't want to cut up their legs, so therefore, that is considered mekom patur, even less than 3 tfachim.
But
it's not batel.
It's not fair.
It's not batel to Reshut HaRabim. One second, just finish. One second. No, it's a good example too. Aval hizmi vehigi, afal gav delo gevi shlosha. Even if it's not 3 tvachim, it's makom petur. You're right, Matan. You're right. L'chor, you could say the same thing. If you have a hot charcoal, you probably could argue the same thing.
Yeah.
Exactly.
No. So wait. So the brick, it's something that is possible. Let's say there is like a lot of pressure of people.
Yeah.
Okay, and you have to move fast. Sometimes, like you just mentioned, the kotel. You go to, let's say, for slichot, and you see hundreds of thousands of people. So you have to go and step on something because they're gonna.
Okay, I hear.
Crash you.
Okay.
But something that for sure I'm not going to step on. Lechatchila. Okay, this is. It's very hard to compare.
I think we're going by the norm. The norm. What's the normal thing? What's the normal thing? If you were walking on the sidewalk, Abaye and Rava say, if you see a brick,
I got it.
you would go around it.
Obviously.
So that's what Abaye. Well, they're going to get to that in a minute, but that's what Abaye and Rava are saying. But Hizmi and Higi, the thorn bush, that's something even less. Hizmi v'Higi.
But where we have a thorn bush in a regular walkway.
You can have sometimes you have thorn bush outside. You have sometimes there's these things you're not going to step in even less than 3 tefachim. So that would be mekom petur even less than 3 tefachim. Says Abai and Rav. Let's continue. B'chia bar Rav Amar. B'chia bar Rav extends. He says no. Afilu hizmi v'higi. No, even hizmi v'higi. If it's not 3 tefachim, it's batel to the reshut harabim. It has to be 3 tefachim to be considered mekom petur. And Rashi explains why. Because it's true. Somebody who's not wearing shoes wouldn't step in his mivihigi, but if you're wearing shoes, you would. So therefore, if it's not 3 tefachim tall, it's batel to the reshut harabim. Only if it's above that, it wouldn't be batel, it would be makom petur. Avol tzoah, but says Chia Barav, if it's tzoah, if it's excrement, it's on the street, so lo. He says lo. Tzoah is excrement. Means
right, Rav, אבל אומר פה his mivihigi.
Yeah.
Although it's not 3 tefachim.
Yeah.
People will choose step on it.
That's exactly right.
So
that's the point. Exactly right. 100%.
So his nevigi even less than tefachim.
According to the second shita. Okay, yes. You're good. 100%. Yeah.
So if you're throwing the sticky things on his nevigi less than tefachim, is chayav.
It's machloket. It's machloket.
It's machloket.
It's machloket.
Why the
first shita Abai and Rav are saying if it's hizmi v'higi, since that's something that people won't naturally step on, so even less than 3 tefachim, you're not going to be chayav. You're not going to be chayav. It's considered makom petur. That's Abai and Rav. But Chia Barav argues on that. He says since people would step on hizmi v'higi when they're wearing shoes, so therefore if it's less than 3 tefachim, it actually is considered batel to the reshut harabim. It has to be higher than 3 tefachim to become makom petur. Exactly.
אבל hizmi v'higi when he said here. אוקיי, וזרק ותח בפניה חייב על גבה פטור. אביי ורב בדעה ברית רביו, והוא שגובה 3 טפחים, יודע סיני רבים. זה על הסטון. אבל איזמי ויגי, אפל גב דלו גבי 3.
Even if it's less than 3 tefachim, since people don't step on it, it's considered makom petur. People don't step on it. Makom petur. Comes Chia Barav, and Chia Barav argues. Says no. That also needs to be 3 tefachim.
Because people would choose step on it. They don't wear it all day.
If they're wearing shoes. That's what Rashi learns. So since if you're wearing shoes, you would step on it. Unless it's 3 tefachim tall, it's batel to reshut harabim. Achloket.
Okay.
Now let's go. But says Chia Barav, but tzoah, no one's going to step on it. So therefore, tzoah, if somebody picks something and throws it on tzoah, it's makom petur, exactly. According to Chia Barav, because he takes the logic a step further. He says, tzoah,
it's not attached to the ground.
Doesn't have to be attached. It's placed, in place, not moving. That's Chia Barav. But Rav Ashi comes and Rav Ashi argues on the entire shita here.
Rashi?
Rav Ashi. Rav Ashi says, I don't agree with the whole thing. The whole thing you're saying is that if somebody won't step on it, it's considered makom petur, even if it's less than 3 tefachim. I disagree with that. Why does he disagree with that? Because Rav Ashi says, we know in halacha, there's a concept called lavud. What is lavud? Lavud means if something is within 3 tefachim of something else, it's batel to that. It's considered part of that. So says Rav Ashi, it doesn't make a difference if somebody will step, will not step. If it's less than 3 tvachim, even if they won't step there, that is batel to the reshut harabim. So Rav Ashi amar afilu tzoah, even with tzoah, if it's within 3 tvachim of the reshut harabim, it's batel to the reshut harabim. So Rav Ashi argues the entire svara that we're saying. The other shitot are saying a chidush. If it's within 3 tvachim but you won't step on it, that's considered mekom petur. Rav Ashi says, no, it's not true. In Ilchot Sukkah and Ilchot Shabbat, we always have this concept of lavud. Lavud means if it's within 3 tvachim, it's batel, and therefore you can't tell me that would be a makom petur, even if people wouldn't step on it. So it has to be at least 3 tvachim or above in order to be considered a separate
blend with the Reshut Harabim?
Exactly. That's what Rav Ashi would hold, exactly. All right, let's go ahead, Chaver. This is the last point here. Amar Rava Devei Rav Shila. So Rava from the Beit Midrash, Rav Shila said, Ki atar Rav Dimi Amar Rav Yochanan. When Rav Dimi came, he said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, Ein karmilit pechuta me'arba'a. A karmilit is not less than 4 by 4 tefachim in area, like we've spoken out many times. Right? Karmilit has to be at least 4 by 4 tefachim in area. Less than that is mekom petur. When we spoke out less than that, right? The Amar Rav Sheshet added, V'tofeset ad asara. Now this is unclear, but it reaches or grabs until 10 tefachim. Now, what does it mean it reaches until 10 tefachim? Right, till 10 tefachim, what does it mean? No, but what does it mean? Meaning the question the Gemara is going to try to figure out now is, okay, I understand the area is 4 by 4 tefachim. But what does it mean tofeset? It means height, but what does it mean it says the karmilit is until 10 tvachim. So what does it mean the karmilit is until 10 tvachim? So let's see. Mai v'tofeset ad asara. What does it mean when it says it reaches or it grabs until 10 tvachim? What does that mean? So let's see. Very good. Ilema, if you say de'i ika mechitza asara, if you have walls that are at least 10 tvachim tall, hu dehave karmilit. That is a karmilit. Now we know that's not true. How do we know that's not true?
From the houses.
Because what's that considered if it's 10 tvachim tall? The walls?
Rashut
Yachid. We know if it's 4x4 with 10 tvachim walls, it's Rashut. So, but that's the Havamina. Gemara says maybe what Rav Sheshet means is if it's 4x4 tvachim and it has walls that are 10 tvachim tall, that's considered karmilit. But the problem is it's not true. So let's see. The lo, but if it's not 10 tvachim tall, lo, it's lo ave karmilit is not considered karmilit. V'lo, is that not less than 10 tvachim is karmilit? V'hamar Rav Gidel Amar Rav Chia Bar Yosef Amar Rav Bayit. Now listen to this case. You have a very short house. Bayit, a house. She'en b'tocho asara. So you have a house that
small
the inside, like a very small tent. I mean, this is very low. She'en b'tocho asara. So let's say up till the roof is 9 tvachim. Okay, 9 tvachim. But the roof is 1 tefach thick.
You would consider it like a doghouse.
Literally a doghouse. A good example is a doghouse.
Okay.
9 tefachim of airspace inside, and then the roof is 1 tefach. That's the case here. Bayit she'en b'tocha asara. Inside is not 10 tefachim. V'kiryo mashlimo la'asara. And the roof is 1 tefach, so now on top of it would be above 10 tefachim. Okay. So what does he say? He says like this. Al gago mutar letaltel b'kulo. On top of the roof, you could carry in the whole thing, because that's a reshut hayachid. Because on top of it, you have 10 tvachim walls above it, because we know, like you mentioned before, the walls go up on the sides. It's a chidush and halacha, good asik. But the point is, on top of it is reshut hayachid because it's above 10 tvachim. But bitocho, inside of it, which you don't have walls that are 10 tvachim tall, ein metaltalin bo ela dalid amot. One second. Ein metaltalin bo ela dalid amot. You can't carry only up till 4 amot, because that's considered a karmilit. So the point that we see is, you see, it doesn't have to have walls of 10 tvachim to be karmilit. The opposite. If it's walls of 10 tvachim, it's reshut hayachid. If it's less than 10 tvachim, it's considered karmilit. That's the point that we see.
I don't understand the fact, the whole sugya with the roof.
What's the problem?
If this is one unit, right? The whole doghouse.
But the different areas are different sections.
So what? The gag become like a...
On top of the roof is reshut hayachid, and inside is karmilit, exactly. Yeah.
So how are you allowed to be metaltel? Because
on top of it, it's reshut hayachid. No problem. Inside karmilit, so there's a sur. So go on the roof.
It doesn't make any sense. It has to be very small, first of all.
Yeah, very small.
4x4. No, 4x4 and up, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then...
Yeah.
תחשוב איזה מלונה, כאילו,
הגג
של המלונה נהיה עכשיו.
By the way,
בדיוק
בכלל.
הסוף של הגג זה 10.
כן.
אז מה שמתחת זה קרמלית.
Exactly.
מה שמעל זה, בגלל שהקירות עולים בגודסיק, כאילו יש לך קירות דמיוניות, זה פשוט היחיד.
Exactly. But the point we're proving is, we're going to discuss that case more tomorrow, don't worry. But the point that we're proving is, you see clearly, 10 tvachim walls doesn't make it into karmilit, the opposite. That's reshut hayachid, and karmilit is less than 10 tvachim walls. So what does it mean with tofeset ad asara? So you already said the answer. Let's see. Lamai v'tofeset ad asara. What does it mean? The ad asara until 10 tvachim hu dehavya karmilit. That's considered karmilit. If the walls are till 10, the lo ad bichlal, that's considered karmilit. L'ma'ala me'asara tvachim, above 10 tvachim, lo ave karmilit. That's not considered karmilit. That would now be considered something else. And we'll see. It could either be a kompetur or it could be actually reshut hayachid. We'll see right now. Like Shmuel said to his Talmud Rav Yehuda. Rav Yehuda, his student, was very sharp. So he used to say shinina, sharp one. Shmuel called his student Rav Yehuda, sharp one, shinina, shinun. Lo tehave b'mili de Shabbata l'mala me'asara. Don't discuss the matter of Shabbat above 10 tvachim. What he was saying was, don't think it's the same. Above 10 tvachim is a different story. So what was he saying? For what halacha? If you want to say that reshut hayachid is not above 10 tvachim, But what Yochai just mentioned is we know it's not true. Because actually, when it comes to Reshut HaYachid, we look at it as if the walls go up ad l'rakia. If you have walls that are 10 tfachim tall, that's Reshut HaYachid, we imagine that it goes all the way up to Shamayim. Because V'amar Rav Chizda na'atz kaneh Reshut HaYachid. Rav Chizda said, if somebody put a stick in Reshut HaYachid, v'zarak v'nach al gabav. So you have the stick, it goes much higher than the walls. And then someone threw something from the Reshut HaRabim and it landed on top of that stick. Now the stick is not where it is, surrounded by walls, but below on the ground, there are walls that are 10 tfachim. Afilu gavoa mea ama, even if the stick is 100 amot tall, chayav. That's considered hotza'ah from Reshut HaRabim to Reshut HaYachid. Mipnei Reshut HaYachid ole ad l'rakia. Because Reshut HaYachid goes up till Shamayim. So therefore... so 1 second. So Reshut HaYachid, we know the walls go all the way ad l'rakia. That can't be what Shmuel was saying. Ella, turning to Zayin Amud Bet, the Ein Reshut HaRabim l'mala me'asara. Maybe you'll say the pshat is, and we mentioned this before also, Reshut HaRabim is not above 10 tfachim. Meaning, in the Reshut HaRabim, until 10 tfachim is considered part of the Reshut HaRabim. Above 10 tfachim is makom petur. It's a different thing. The problem is, why does Shmuel have to say this? Shmuel is an Amorah. There's a Tana that says it's mifurash. We know this clearly. Matnitini, it's a Mishnah. The Tanan, because the Mishnah says, Azor dal amot bekotel. If somebody throws something 4 amot in Reshut HaRabim and it lands on a wall, lemala me'asara tvachim, if it's above 10 tvachim in the Reshut HaRabim, kizorek ba'avir. You're not chayav. That's considered makom petur or karmilit, but not chayav like Reshut HaRabim. Lemata me'asara, if it's below 10 tfachim, kizorek ba'aretz, it's like throwing it on the ground. So we have a clear Mishnah that tells us in Reshut HaRabim, above 10 tfachim is not considered part of the Reshut HaRabim. So what does Shmuel mean when he says that don't discuss 10 tfachim, above 10 tfachim is a different story? Ella, what Shmuel must be talking about? A karmilit. He's talking about a karmilit, which like you said, Matan, exactly. De'ein karmilit lemala me'asara, that a karmilit is not above 10 tfachim. Above 10 tfachim is a different story. Ve'akilu barabanan mikule Reshut HaYachid u'mikule Reshut HaRabim. Like this. Since karmilit is be'etim, it's a chumra midrabanan. Right? So what they did was, they gave it the leniency, the kula Reshut HaYachid, and they also gave it the leniency of Reshut HaRabim. How? Let's see. Mikule Reshut HaYachid, it has the leniency of Reshut HaYachid. Te'i'ika makom arba'a, that if the karmilit is 4 by 4 tfachim, like a Reshut HaYachid, hu dahavya karmilit. Then you have the chumrah of karmilit. Ve'ilo, but if it's not 4 by 4 tfachim, it's less than that. Makom petur ba'almahu, that's a makom petur. So it has the kula of Reshut HaYachid, which means it needs to be at least 4 by 4 tfachim to be even considered karmilit, just like Reshut HaYachid. If it's less than that, it's not considered Reshut HaYachid. So similarly with karmilit, it's makom petur if it's less than that. But also mikule Reshut HaRabim, it also has the kula Reshut HaRabim, the ad asara tvachim, until 10 tvachim, hu dahavya karmelit, it's considered karmelit. Means if the walls are till 3 to 10 tvachim, it's considered a karmelit. Lemala me'asara tvachim, but if it's above 10 tvachim, just like in Reshut HaRabim, above 10 tvachim is not considered Reshut HaRabim, but it's considered either makom petur, karmelit, something else. So also, lo avya karmelit, above 10 tfachim for karmelit, is not considered anymore karmelit. That's what it means, tofeset ad asara. It means above that is not considered karmelit anymore. Rather, it's considered again makom petur. So now, what we just concluded is a bunch of halachot. Again, let's just review a couple of them. To be considered karmelit, it has to be an area that is between 3 and 10 tfachim, but not more and not less. If it's less than that, it's batel to the floor. If it's above that, it's considered something else, makom petur. It also has to be a place where it's used by the Rabbim to some degree, but it's not in the normal travel of the Rabbim. Okay? That's just basically those are the rules that we concluded.
When you say the first thing,
yeah,
but karmelit cannot, makom petur, for example, cannot be 4 on 4.
Exactly.
It's lower than that.
Makom petur would be less than 4 by 4.
So if the karmelit is 4 on 4 and it's higher than 10 tfachim, it's Reshut HaYachid.
It's Reshut HaYachid, right? That should be Reshut HaYachid. Exactly.
Okay, so makom patur, it's only.
Oh, sorry. Excuse me. No, that would depend. Actually, is that a place for living or is it not a place for living? If it's a place for living, so then you'd say that's considered Reshut HaYachid. But if it's in the public, that's considered Reshut.
Makom patur. Right?
Sorry. 4 by 4 tfachim and 10 tfachim walls. Yeah, that would be considered Either makom patur or reshut hayachid, depends on really where it is, exactly.
But makom patur cannot be because it's have to be less than 4x4.
But no, but that's only less than 4x4. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Yeah, but in this case, that's what we're saying. It has the chomer or the kulav reshut harabim. Reshut harabim above 4 tfachim is considered not reshut harabim. So it's the same thing here. That's the chidush. We give it the kulav reshut harabim. Also above that, it's considered makom patur. Meaning that would depend on what it's used for. If it's 4x4 tfachim and 10 tfachim tall, and that's a place people are living, that's reshut hayachid. If it's 10 tfachim tall and it's in the middle of the street, so perhaps that would be considered actually makom patur. Makom patur, exactly. That comes up very interesting. The nafkamina there, that would come out. Yes.
Okay, אז מה אמרת הרב? תעשה review לזה.
זהו, that's it.
You start to make the review.
No, that's it. I just mentioned. That was it. Really, there's 2 rules that we came out with today about karmilit, which are very important rules in terms of understanding. Really, the concept of karmilit is an area that be'etzem is part of reshut harabim. Be'etzem, it looks like, but since people don't usually walk in that area, it's off the side street. So Chazal say we can't call this reshut, call it karmilit.
Like we have in the shul that you left here, next to the stores, there is like this cement.
Maybe, yeah.
This small...
Where you park like car for a few minutes?
No, right here. Like you walk, right?
Yeah.
And next to the store, there is the door, and there is like a small piece of cement, and you see the line.
You're saying
the bricks.
You could walk there, but it's not convenient.
This is the, let's say, the store, okay? And here, like you have like a small cement, and here you see the bricks of the street. This, like we mentioned about his store, right? There is like, an area.
Right, exactly. By the way, exactly. That's a good example, by the way. The the seating area outside of your store might be considered karmilit, actually. Like as a similar example. It might be.
But
it's interesting.
But people
example,
do pass by.
Because it's not fenced in. It's not fenced in. It's difficult. When you're walking on the street there, you go around it. You don't want to walk. I mean, it's not convenient to walk straight through.
But it's part of the street at the end.
So that's very interesting. That might be a good example of karmilit, actually. That's very interesting. Could be. I mean, you have to know, Bichlal, by the way, Reshut HaRabim, it's not so pashat that this would be Reshut HaRabim either. Because to be Reshut HaRabim, really, it has to be 16 amot wide. And as we said before, some Shittot told you need 600,000 people traveling through that area or having access to that area. So it's not so simple if even the main street here would necessarily be considered. Yeah, no, 100%. But that's, you're not allowed to carry anyways, midah banan. I'm talking about on a doraita level, for it to be in a sur doraita, exactly.
If there was over 600,000 people here that passing by, you couldn't do a roof. Like in New York. Correct. That's the issue in Ocean Parkway.
Exactly, that's the
because
debate.
There is so many people driving by, so there is no roof. They have to do the roof before Ocean Parkway and after Ocean, like the east side and the west side.
Exactly. All right, we'll stop here at the top of the page. We'll pick up tomorrow. We're going to talk about that example that we were just saying, where the house is 9 tefachim with the roof being 1 tefach. We'll analyze that, God willing, with Zayin Amud Bet tomorrow. Wonderful day, Chevra.